This is the Chris Berry Show. Expert information on wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
Welcome to the show. This is Chris Berry, and we're going to spend the next hour talking about wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And so we always start this show with a positive focus, something positive that happened within the last week. And it's a great way to start off the show. We also do the same thing at home when we're sitting down for dinner. We go around the table and everyone will share something positive that happened. So this past week, my daughter Madison, I was able to sneak out of work during the day to attend her kindergarten graduation. So she's 6 and she's wrapping up kindergarten this year. And they put on a little kind of graduation type event for the parents. And so it was great. Each one of the kids was able to stand up and say kind of what they wanted to do when they grow up. So a couple of the boys wanted to be police officers, garbage men, construction workers. Some of the girls wanted to be like a nurse. And then my daughter Madison, she wanted to be a veterinarian. So I thought that was pretty cute to see that. And then also it was great to see all the work that she's done this past year in kindergarten. So it's pretty exciting to have that. Plus, my daughter also had her dance recital. So she goes to a dance class each week, and it's just great to see how musical both of the kids are. My son Ryan, he loves playing piano, and he plays his recorder in school. And then my daughter Madison, she plays violin, and then she just had her dance recital, which was awesome to see. And so it's great to just see the kids growing up. My son Ryan, he's 8, and my daughter Madison, she's 6. So apparently she's going to be a veterinarian. So that's pretty exciting. And then also I found out that she wanted to marry Brody, which was one of the kids in her class. And so one of the last days of school, she was brushing her hair a little more than she usually does. And I was like, wow, Maddie, you're really brushing your hair really well. And she wanted to take a comb to school. I'm like, well, why do you want to take a comb? And she's like, well, I want to make sure my hair looks pretty for Brody. So already at age 6, she's causing me more gray hair just thinking about the boys. But she's a little ball of joy. And so hopefully as she grows up and goes through her teenager years, she uses her powers for good, not evil. So, but apparently I need to start making some marriage plans for her and Brody. And because she loves Brody, she told me, but Brody doesn't know this, apparently. She told me that as well. So it's just adorable. So that's the positive focus for this week. And just seeing the little kids growing up and graduating kindergarten, and my daughter's dance recital. So it was good. With school starting to end, they're both excited for summer. So today on the show, what we're going to talk about is 6 common retirement mistakes. So 6 common retirement mistakes. But before I want to get into that, there's 2 things I want to talk about. And the first one is this. There's a new act, and we talked about this a little bit in the last show, but there's a new bill that just passed the House, and it's called the Secure Act. And there's a couple interesting provisions. And as we've been giving workshops this past week, a lot of questions have come up on this. But the Secure Act, which just passed the House, I think like 417 to 3, the Secure Act, what the Secure Act talks about is pushing back the required minimum distributions, or the time that you have to start taking your required minimum distributions, pushing it back from 70 and a half to 72. So when you turn 70 and a half right now, you have to take out 3.65% of your IRAs, 401ks, tax deferred accounts, and pay the income tax, whether you like it or not. So the Secure Act, and the big positive that people are pitching the Secure Act, is that they're pushing back the required age for those RMDs, required minimum distributions, from 70 and a half to now 72. So I think that's a little bit of a Trojan horse. I don't think that's the real purpose of the Secure Act, or why this bill was put in play. Because in reality, that's helpful, but it's not really a game changer. So really why I think the bill was passed is more for some kind of devious reasons from the politician standpoint. So in addition to that provision of pushing back the RMDs from 70.5 to 72, another part of the act is that when you have a inherited IRA, so when you pass away and you leave this to the next generation, right now, they can stretch out that IRA. So you might have heard of a stretch IRA. So when you inherit an IRA, you have to start taking out required minimum distributions, no matter what your age is, immediately. So for example, right now at 70.5, you have to take out 3.65%. If you were to inherit an IRA, let's say you're age 40, you might have to take out 2%, but you still have to take out RMDs, and you can stretch it out over your lifetime. But what the Secure Act is doing is saying that instead of being able to stretch out an inherited IRA over your lifetime, instead, all the taxes have to be paid within 10 years. So it's putting a cap on the stretch IRA. And this is big news, but it's not enough people are talking about this as part of the bill. And so why I think it's a little bit devious that the politicians have included this or put this bill together in such a way like this is that they can now go back to their constituents and say that we haven't necessarily raised taxes. But by killing off the stretch or limiting it to only 10 years, basically what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to get our tax money, this tax deferred money, we're going to force our beneficiaries to pay the tax on it sooner rather than later. So I think this is the real purpose of the bill, is to kill off the stretch IRA. Because it is a way for politicians to generate more tax income without going back to their constituents to say that we raised taxes. Because in essence, if you look at those tax deferred accounts as almost like a loan or a mortgage, they're calling the mortgages earlier. They're not raising taxes per se, but they're raising tax revenue by only allowing the stretch IRA up to 10 years. So that hasn't been signed into law yet, but it did pass the House and it has a lot of bipartisan support. So we see this as something that will pass in some form or another. And don't be fooled. While it's called the Secure Act and they're going to pitch it as creating some more advantages for retirees in terms of how they manage their IRAs, in reality, it's a money grab by the politicians to kill off the stretch IRA. So that's one big thing in the news. And then the other big thing in the news that just came across is that apparently Social Security and Medicare, Social Security kind of screwed up or made some processing errors with regards to withholding Medicare premiums. So there's going to be some seniors that are going to be getting a letter from Social Security and Medicare saying that they have to pay these additional Medicare premiums because Social Security made quote unquote, quote, processing error, unquote, where they forgot apparently to withhold some seniors' Medicare premiums. So if you're a senior and you get a letter from Social Security or Medicare saying that you owe additional Medicare premiums, most likely in this situation it's not a scam. Well, that said, probably the scammers will look at this to try to put together a scam, but Medicare and Social Security did screw this up. So there are going to be some seniors that will have to pay these Medicare premiums, and if you fail to pay them because Social Security, quote unquote, forgot to, you have to pay these Medicare premiums. Otherwise, your Medicare coverage may run out. So just something to keep an eye on. So now today, what I wanted to do is get into 6 retirement planning mistakes. So 6 retirement mistakes. And the first one is focusing on the wrong thing. So when we're talking about retirement, one of the most important pieces of retirement, and we call this one of the 5 pillars of sound retirement, is having an income plan. And when we talk about income, we're talking about making sure that your income lasts and your assets last as long as you do. And when we talk to our retirees and seniors about income and income in retirement, one of the most important things that I hear is security, making sure that retirement income is secure. And that generally means, to the individuals I'm talking about, reducing market volatility, being comfortable, not outliving money, that kind of thing. Or looking at healthcare costs, whether it's long-term care costs or Medicare premiums. So a lot of people are concerned about managing the income in retirement. And one of the big mistakes we see people make is focusing on the wrong thing. They're just focused on what their investments are generating, like their rate of return. But really what's more important is creating that security, making sure that we have a plan with regards to income. And typically when we look at income, it's really a three-legged stool for retirement income. Where people look to government entitlement programs like Social Security. So for many individuals, many retirees, Social Security makes up about, on average, according to latest statistics, about 40% of most retirees' income. And that's kind of interesting because if you look at the way Social Security was initially created, when Social Security was initially created, the full retirement age was 65. And the interesting thing was that the life expectancy for the average American when Social Security was created was 63. So take a second to let that sink in. That full retirement age for Social Security was going to kick in at 65, but the average life expectancy at the time was 63. So Social Security really, when it was created, was a little bit of a longevity hedge. It was never created to be 40% of most American retirees' retirement income. And so that's why if you look at your Social Security statement, we see things like by year 2034, Social Security will only have enough money to pay out 76 cents or 74 cents on the dollar. Because Social Security wasn't really created to be such a dependent source of income in retirement. It was really more of a longevity hedge. But Social Security still is a big portion of a lot of retirees' income. And I think it will be if you're on Social Security right now. I don't think that necessarily will change. But if you're currently working and you're 10, 20, 30 years away from retirement, Social Security might look a little bit different, or they might push back when full retirement age is. I could see them easily pushing it back from 66 or 67, which it is now, to maybe age 70, especially as we're living longer than ever. So Social Security makes up one part of the retirement income three-legged stool. The second part, or the second leg, is the employer-sponsored plans. So these things are like your 401ks, 403bs, your pensions, where either through the savings in your retirement or through the pensions, the income streams offered by employers, which is starting to go away, that makes up a leg of the retirement income three-legged stool. And then the third part is just your retirement savings. So this is your own personal savings and investments, which could be things like your IRAs, CD, savings accounts, mutual funds. And this is the leg of the stool which we have the most control, and that may constitute the largest portion of retirement income in the future. And what we found is that there's kind of the old retirement paradigm and the new retirement paradigm, where there now is more of a focus, more of an emphasis on individuals taking control and taking more personal responsibility for their retirement. It's up to them to contribute to their 401ks and IRAs, versus in the past, everyone would have a pension. Those pensions are starting to go away, and even when companies are offering those pensions, a lot of time what a lot of individuals are looking at doing is taking that lump sum buyout, taking that lump sum pension and just turning it into retirement savings so that they can exert more control over the asset. And so one of the big things that we're concerned about when it comes to generating income in retirement, and this is probably more important, and this is really what the first mistake is all about, is not focusing on are you getting 5% or 6% return on your investments, but one of the big issues in terms of retirement income is looking at what's called sequence of return risk, or the big mistake is not looking at sequence of return risk. And what sequence of return risk is all about is the fact that while you're working, you are in what's called an accumulation phase, meaning you were just banking money, saving money, putting money away. And then if the market went up or down, it didn't really have an effect on your lifestyle because you weren't drawing on your assets. You weren't having to rely on your assets. You had income coming in from work. But what happens when you retire is that now you may have what's called an income gap, where you look at the amount of expenses you have going out each month versus the amount of fixed income sources like Social Security and pensions. And if there's a gap there, then you have to figure out a way to close that gap. And that's where we start drawing on the assets. So when we're talking about going from kind of working to retirement, we're looking at a different phase in what we call the money cycle. We're going from an accumulation phase to now a distribution phase. And one of the biggest issues is what's called sequence of return risk, where now if we're looking at pulling money from our assets and all of a sudden the market goes down, it could have a dramatic effect on our retirement. And stick with us as we continue this conversation talking about the 6 retirement mistakes.
If you're looking for guidance in estate planning, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton, like Brian Measle and his family did.
For quite a long time, I worked on my parents trying to get them to establish an estate plan or a will or a trust, and they had absolutely nothing in place. We had set a first initial meeting with Chris on a Monday with him, and that Friday afternoon, my mom had passed away, and we had nothing in place. So we kept our meeting, obviously with a heavy heart, and Chris made us feel very comfortable and assured. My dad is a person who doesn't care for politicians or attorneys, and he really likes Chris. Thought it was a fantastic fit for us and our circumstance.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800.
All right, so welcome back. So we're talking about one of the biggest issues in retirement is not focusing too much on rate of return and ignoring a bigger issue, and that's sequence of return risk. And what we're talking about here is just the sequence of return. So if we say the stock market over time does 6% or 8%, that's fine. That might be an average, but every year the market could go up 20% or the market could go down 20%. And the timing of when those ups and downs happen can have a dramatic effect on your retirement. And I have some charts that I could show you, but you might be listening to this while you're driving, and trying to show you something on the radio is a little bit difficult. But it's something that when we have one of our in-person meetings, a strategy session, that we can go over with our clients. But the idea is that, and let's say that, let's go back in time. So let's say you've been saving for retirement, you have your money in the market, it's 2007, you're about to retire in 2009, all your money is in the market, and then all of a sudden 2008 stock market crash happens. And let's say now, if you looked at having $500,000 in your IRA, well, now all of a sudden that $500,000 is $300,000. And if you're planning on retiring and all the money was in the market, well, your retirement could have just taken a 20, 30, 40% haircut, where now what options are you left with? Are you left with continuing working longer? Are you taking a second job? Are you cutting your lifestyle by 40% in retirement? So how do we protect against this sequence or return risk? You might also hear this called like the retirement red zone of all of a sudden as we get near retirement, it's not so much about accumulation. Now it's more about preservation. Well, this is where as we near retirement, we should consider allocating some of our assets to more conservative investments to create a steady stream of income in retirement. Even in today's environment, it's possible to achieve a predictable and steady cash flow by putting together a income strategy. And there's different ways that we can do it, but one of the things that we like to do is look at it from a standpoint of time horizon, of when do you plan on utilizing the money? And so this is where we call it a bucket plan, where you should have money that's safe and liquid in our now bucket, and that's money that we're going to use maybe over the next year. And then in our soon bucket, this is where we create that income stream for the next 5 to 10 years. So that if the market goes up or down, we've created some conservative investments or an income stream, a guaranteed income stream, so that if the market goes up or down, it's not going to really affect our retirement. And then we have a later bucket and that money is more geared towards growth, and that's money that we're going to utilize later. So if the market does go up or down, we understand that over time it goes up. So understanding the time horizons and allocating our investments and assets in such a way that the ups and downs of the market isn't going to have a dramatic effect on our retirement is very important. So it's not all about rate of return of, I want to get 6% or 7% or 8% in my investments. What's more important is understanding sequence of return risk. So that's the first mistake. The second mistake is misunderstanding risk. So most people, when they hear the word risk, investment risk, they're thinking, I could lose money here. And that's true, but in the investment world, using the phrase risk, it's not all about that. Really what it is about standard deviations. It's about understanding that investments go up and down, and we're able to measure the volatility of different portfolios and investments looking over a historical perspective. And understand that no one can really calculate where the market's going to go. The market goes up and down, but over time it goes up. But again, we have to take into account that sequence or return risk in our investments. And as we get near retirement, it becomes even more important, because if the market does go down, we don't necessarily have as much time to make up for those losses. So one of the things that we do with our clients as we're putting together a retirement income or investment portfolio is making sure that we manage risk and we allocate the investments to someone's volatility tolerance. So how much risk are you willing to take on? And everyone wants like the upside of the market, but understand when you're shooting for big gains in your investments, you're also taking on the risk of big losses as well. And so we need to make sure that your investments are matching, or the amount of risk you're taking on in your investment portfolio is matching your risk tolerance. And so we have some tools that we utilize with our clients to help manage risk and help figure out how much risk they're willing to take on. So a lot of times we allocate a risk score, and we might have different risk scores based on the different buckets of our investments. So in our soon bucket, money that we're going to utilize sooner rather than later, we might have a different risk score than we have in our later bucket. And we like to really allocate a number to this, to quantify it, because if a client comes in and says, I'm an aggressive investor, that could mean a lot of different things. So when we're helping our clients put together an investment portfolio or matching their risk tolerance to their portfolio, we ask them certain questions to be able to quantify what is aggressive, what is conservative. And we do it on a scale of 1 to 100 to come up with this risk score. And so think of it kind of like a speed limit, where if you're going 80 miles per hour, you're going to get to your destination probably sooner than someone going 20 miles per hour. But there is a good chance that you could wipe out and you might never reach your destination if you're too aggressive. So we allocate a risk score based on certain questions that we ask our clients to give them a risk score, anywhere from 1 to 100. So again, 80 would be aggressive versus 20, which would be conservative, for example. And that's something where we can ask these questions, and then we can use some software to run this analysis on a portfolio. So based on the questions an individual investor answers, they might have a risk score of 65, let's say. But if their portfolio, after running our analysis, comes out at 80, well, that tells us that the portfolio is a little more risky. And then if the market does have a downturn, they're really going to be feeling the hurt of that downturn. And it's outside of the scope of what they're comfortable with. So that's something that we help our clients with, and that's the second mistake, is not understanding risk. So risk versus return. The more risk you're willing to take on, the higher your potential returns, but also the greater the potential losses. Now, the third mistake is not understanding the hidden fees in your portfolio. So if you have mutual funds, then most likely you're going to have some expenses inside of those mutual funds. Whether you have your money managed by a financial planner, by an investment house, or if you're doing it yourself, even at like a Vanguard, that type of thing. So there's some hidden fees in there, and there's something called expense ratios, where depending on how you have investments situated, there's going to be, first of all, a fee to manage your investments, but then inside of your portfolio, if you have mutual funds, there's also a fee that you're paying for those mutual funds, because you're paying someone to put together these mutual funds, which is an assortment of different stocks and bonds and that type of things inside of the mutual funds. And so one of the things that we're able to do is discover what are these hidden expense ratios inside of the mutual funds. Because if you have these fees inside of the mutual funds, those are things that eat away at your returns. And where we see some of the largest expenses inside of these mutual funds, some of the largest expense ratios are inside of these target funds. So if you have like a target fund that says, okay, it's a target 2020 fund, a lot of times there's some hidden fees in there that are eating away at your returns. And one of the things we can do is we can explore what these hidden fees are and look at ways to allocate a portfolio to minimize these expense ratios. Because I don't think anyone can necessarily control what the market's going to do. The market's going to go up or down, but we can try to minimize these fees as much as possible. So that's mistake number 3, not knowing what you're paying inside of your investment portfolio. Mistake number 4 and mistake number 5 kind of go hand in hand. But mistake number 4 is leaving your IRA or 401k or 403b directly to the spouse or children without exploring tax diversification. So one of the things that we see quite often is a lack of tax diversification as it relates to our investments. A lot of individuals have been sold on this idea of defer paying taxes as long as possible, where it's not uncommon for an individual coming to my office to have $700,000 of pre-tax dollars, a house, and maybe $20,000 of post-tax dollars. And then what happens is when they turn 70 and a half, all of a sudden they get hit with this hidden retirement savings tax time bomb of, oh no, all of a sudden I have to pay tax on all this stuff as I pull this money out. And one of the issues we see is that Well, and I had this come up in the workshop, actually, we were doing last night in Livonia, is an individual said, well, I don't really care because when I pass away, I'll just have someone else pay the tax. Well, what if you're a married couple? How does that work? So let's say you've deferred paying taxes your whole life, and then all of a sudden you pass away, and you leave your IRAs or 401ks to your spouse. Well, guess what? As they pull this money out, they're going to have to pay tax on it. Now, why is this a problem, or why should you explore this? Well, understand that when you're married, when you're filing for taxes, you're filing under what's called married filing jointly, which means you have an expanded tax bracket. And then when you pass away, now all of a sudden we have a single filing, and it's more of a compressed tax bracket. For example, if we have a married filing jointly tax bracket, let's say you're making $100,000, that's going to put you right in the middle of the 22% tax bracket. Versus if you're single filing, if you have $100,000 of income, now you're at a 24% tax bracket. Or another example, or a better example, might be, let's say you're married filing jointly and you have $70,000 worth of income coming in. Well, that's going to put you at a 12% tax bracket. But if now all of a sudden one spouse passes away, we're widowed, we have that same amount of income coming in because that's how much income that survivor needs from those tax-deferred accounts, all of a sudden now we're at a 22% tax bracket. So just because one spouse passed away, we have to pay 10% more in taxes. And then on top of that, plus now we might have to pay more tax on our Social Security as well, because your Social Security is taxed based on your income. And if we go from married filing jointly to now a single filing, chances are you're going to have to pay more tax on your Social Security. And then the third piece of that is that now you might have to pay more in Medicare premiums as well, because that's based on your adjusted gross income, the amount of your Medicare premiums. And if we're married filing jointly, we have an expanded space for Medicare premiums. Where, for example, if we have a married filing jointly and they make $100,000, then their Medicare Part B premium is only $135. Versus now if we go to a single filing and we have $100,000, now it's $189. So just because one spouse passes away, we have increased taxes on those tax-deferred accounts, which leads to an increased tax on your Social Security and also leads to an increased Medicare premium. So something to think about would be looking at ways to get some tax diversification, or maybe when we're talking about legacy planning, we're not just talking about planning for the next generation, but we're also planning for that surviving spouse, where we don't want to put them in a position where now all of a sudden they have to pay more tax because all they had to live off of was these tax-deferred accounts. They have to pay more tax, they have to pay more tax on their Social Security, and they have to pay a higher Medicare premium. So what are some options to try to protect against this situation? Where one of the things we could do is looking at tax diversification, where before one spouse passes away, maybe we can move more money out of those tax-deferred accounts and pay the income tax sooner rather than later. Or maybe we look at some life insurance as a way to create some tax-free money, not just for the next generation, but maybe for that surviving spouse, where now they don't have to rely just on those tax-deferred accounts, where when you pull money out of your IRA or 401k, it's taxed at ordinary income, where everything you pull out of those tax-deferred accounts counts as ordinary income, which raises your tax bracket, which raises the tax you pay on your Social Security, which can raise your Medicare premiums. But instead, looking at some ways to generate tax-free income in retirement. And that's where maybe looking at life insurance makes sense, or doing Roth conversions prior to one spouse passing away. Just something to think about, and it's the third mistake, is we see people not planning for what happens when one spouse passes away. So stick with us as we continue this conversation and we talk about the other retirement planning mistakes we see people making on a regular basis.
If you or a loved one is in need of estate planning, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Dave Marsh did from Pinckney.
You hear stuff about attorneys being, crooks and whatever, I didn't know if I could find one that wasn't going to try and, stiff me. So I was really happy to find the Elder Care Firm. They were just really, really helpful. I went to that seminar, and when I would call people, I'd get calls back. They'd answer questions, and I was real happy with it all. They laid out everything it was going to cost me, and, it gave me a real good peace of mind. I would recommend them to anybody, And I don't recommend a lot of people, but I would recommend them.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. I can help you develop the best plan possible. Call 810-214-3800 to schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation or to reserve your seat at our next workshop. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions.
Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800.
Welcome back. So we're talking about retirement planning mistakes, and I get it. This is dense information. It's confusing, and this might be the first time you're hearing this type of thing, but that's what we're here for, and that's why we have weekly workshops where we try to provide education to the public and our clients about these issues. And we do workshops about once a week, and we call these clarity building workshops. And we have some coming up. We have one in Ann Arbor on Thursday, June 27th from 2 to 4 p.m. Brighton, we have some workshops coming up Thursday, June 20th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Again, that was Thursday, June 20th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at our Brighton office. And then also in Brighton on Wednesday, June 26th, we have one of our 6 p.m. or evening workshops. So that's Brighton, Wednesday, June 26th at 6 p.m. And then Livonia, we're coming to Livonia Tuesday, June 18th at 2 p.m. And then Novi, Wednesday, June 19th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then also in Novi, Tuesday, June 25th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we do these workshops at our different locations, and we have offices in Ann Arbor, Brighton, Livonia, Novi, as well as Bloomfield Hills. And that's where we provide some more information on these different topics. And we call these clarity building workshops, which sounds like a weird name because a lot of times people are walking away from these workshops with more questions than answers, but at least you're getting some clarity on these issues. So I invite you to attend one of those workshops. You do have to register because space is limited. Last night we had a full workshop, or the other night we had a full workshop. All the seats were filled. 25 people were there. We had about 18 households, and they just loved the information. It was a lot of information. They all commented, but it's stuff that for some reason people aren't talking to them about, like not talking about what happens when one spouse passes away, how we get this compressed tax bracket that I was going over in mistake number 3. So today we're talking about retirement planning mistakes. Mistake number 1, focusing on the wrong thing in retirement. It's not about your rate of return or how much you got in the stock market. It's more about creating that income in retirement. And understanding sequence of return risk is probably a bigger risk than your overall rate of return. Mistake number 2 is not understanding risk or misunderstanding risk and risk versus return, and not having a portfolio that's allocated towards your volatility tolerance. Mistake number 3 is not understanding the hidden costs in a lot of investments. For example, and I'll just pick on Fidelity, if you have your money at Fidelity, so there's a fee a lot of times you're paying Fidelity to manage your accounts, whether it's a percentage or transaction costs. But then on top of that, if you have Fidelity target funds, well, guess what? You're paying another level of fees, and that's an expense ratio that sometimes you don't necessarily see. So if you look at your back page of your statement, and all of that really fine small print, it talks about these additional fees, but it's something that we can quantify for our clients. Mistake number 4 is not taking, for a married couple, is not taking into account what happens when one spouse passes away, especially when we have a lot of tax-deferred investments, things like 401ks, IRAs, 403bs. and what happens when one spouse passes away, and this how we see this huge income tax liability quite often without a downsize in terms of expenses. So a lot of times in retirement, when one spouse passes away, the expenses don't really go down that much, but all of a sudden we have this compressed income tax bracket. We have a compressed Social Security, whether your Social Security will get taxed or not, compressed bracket there. And then we see increased Medicare premiums. So all of a sudden the expenses stay the same, but tax liability just skyrockets. And there's things to do to address it ahead of time. Maybe looking at paying the tax sooner rather than later, looking at creating tax-free income sources. And that dovetails into mistake number 5, which is just looking at taxes from a tax preparation standpoint and not doing actual tax planning. So tax preparation, that part's pretty easy. Like if you go to H&R Block or you have someone just prepare your taxes, all they're doing is looking back historically and reporting on that versus true tax planning. So why is tax planning so important? Well, let me ask you some simple questions. So, are we likely to make significant reductions in our national spending? Probably not. Number 2, can this have implication for taxes in the future? Of course. And then number 3, if taxes increase during your retirement, what impact might that have on what is your largest retirement account? So your IRA or 401k. So let me simplify that even further. If I were to ask you right now, do you think taxes will go up or down in the future? What would you say? Most people say taxes would go up or will go up because we're $22 trillion in debt. All these baby boomers are retiring. Social Security is basically bankrupt. We still are in this conflict since 1990. And we're at historically one of the lowest tax brackets in history. And in 2025, taxes are scheduled to go back up. So right now, if you're at the 12% tax bracket, guess what? In 2025, chances are you're going to be in a 15% tax bracket. Or if you're in a 22% tax bracket, chances are you're going to be in a 25% tax bracket. That's just the way the law currently is written, let alone whatever happens in 2020. So because of this, most people think taxes are going to go up in the future. So then the question is, why do we defer paying taxes as long as possible? For example, do you have a 401k? Do you have a traditional IRA? What are you doing? You're deferring when you pay taxes. And if we all just agree that taxes are going up in the future, then doesn't it make sense to pay tax sooner rather than later? So what we're getting at here is the concept of tax diversification. So you might be familiar with diversification in your portfolios of you don't want all your money all in one stock because all of a sudden if that company goes down, you're losing all of your retirement money. For example, if you had all your money in Enron, well, what's that worth now? Not much. Well, similarly, you don't want all of your money in tax-deferred investments because there's different tax categories. For example, we can have taxable accounts. So these are accounts that you have to pay capital gains on, that on the growth you pay tax on, like a checking account, not that you're earning anything on that, or a savings account. What are you getting in your savings account right now? What, 1%, maybe 2% if you're using one of these online savings vehicles? Or a brokerage account. So money that's post-tax that you have to pay capital gains on. So that's one type of investment. That's one type of taxable or tax classification. Second is tax-deferred accounts. So these are your 401ks, your IRAs, your 403bs. This is money that you put the money in without paying any tax on it. And then when you pull the money out, it's taxed at ordinary income rates. So whatever your income tax bracket is, when you pull any money out of these tax-deferred accounts, that's the tax you pay. whether it's 0%, 10%, 12%, 22%, 24, 32, 35, 37%. If you pull any money out of there, that money is taxed. And then the third type of tax classification is tax-free money. So this is money that when you pull the money out, when you use the money out, you don't have to pay any tax. So this would be things like a Roth IRA. The money grows tax-free, and when you pull the money out, you don't have to pay any tax. This would be like a Roth 401k. This would be like a HSA, a health savings account. This would be like a 529 that has to be used for education. You get tax-free growth, and when you pull the money out, it doesn't have any effect on your income tax. You don't have to pay income tax on it. And what that also means is that it's not a factor in Social Security. It's whether your Social Security gets taxed. And likewise, it's not a factor in your Medicare premium either. Now, some people, in our last workshop, someone brought up, well, isn't municipal bonds, isn't that a tax-free investment? The answer is no, because that factors into your provisional income calculation for Social Security. So that factors into whether your Social Security will get taxed or not. So municipal bonds are not a tax-free investment vehicle because they factor into whether your Social Security gets taxed. So it does have an effect on your taxes. So, and then what else is a tax-free investment? Cash value life insurance. The money that you have inside of, say, an index universal life insurance policy, when you pull that money out, that money is tax-free. So my point and mistake number 5 is having all of your money in tax-deferred accounts and not taking into account tax planning. And there's lots and lots and lots of different ramifications for this, and there's tons of different strategies that are available. But if you're around retirement age right now, then I invite you to attend one of our workshops where we can talk about getting to a more tax-efficient retirement. And if you want to learn some more on this, a great resource, a small little book that's really easy to understand, is a book called The Power of Zero that talks about getting to a tax-efficient retirement. It's written by the author is David McKnight. And it's a very quick read, very easy to understand, very digestible. But it talks about this concept of trying to get to the most tax-efficient retirement possible. And this is one of the things that I just love helping clients achieve, is to get to a more tax-efficient retirement. And we have certain strategies that we can walk you through, no matter where you are at in life, to try to achieve a more tax-efficient retirement. So if you're listening to this and right now you're still working, one of the things I'd invite you to do is see if your employer offers a Roth 401k option, where instead of putting money into these tax-deferred accounts, look at paying the tax now so that you can get the tax-free growth on your investment. Or if you're around retirement age, maybe looking at not taking Social Security right away and living off of your IRAs and 401ks while allowing your Social Security to continue to grow. Because your Social Security, every year you delay taking Social Security, you get roughly an 8% increase in your income per month up until age 70. So one of the strategies might be, let's say you retire at 62, not taking Social Security right away, but allowing your Social Security to grow. Because understand that retiring and claiming Social Security, those concepts are not married. You don't have to do them at the same time. So one of the strategies might be to look at, okay, retiring, and then your income drops, and then instead of taking Social Security, allow that to continue to grow, but now start pulling money from those tax-deferred accounts so that you can diffuse what we call the retirement savings tax time bomb that hits you at age 70 and a half, ensuring that you get to a more tax-efficient retirement and allowing your Social Security to grow. So again, mistake number 5 is just looking at tax prep and not doing tax planning. Mistake number 6 is accepting low returns. So understand that there are investment vehicles where you can participate in the upside of the market without participating in the downside or the downturns of the market. So I see a lot of people investing in things like CDs that might get you 2%, 3%. Well, guess what? There's investment vehicles out there that can offer a better rate of return without looking at, without taking on the downside. So there's other options out there where your principal is fully insured. You could create a death benefit that's guaranteed and income tax free to your beneficiaries. Your money could be liquid and accessible at all times. You can get a very competitive interest. When you pull money out of this, you can pull the money out income tax free. And you can also build in some long-term care benefits as well. Now, this might be too good to be true. And what we're talking about here is actually cash value of life insurance. So something like an index universal life insurance. And when you invest in that, the money you pull out can be income tax free. You can participate in the upside of the market, generate a better rate of return than typically CDs, and then also add on some long-term care benefits as well. Now, the downside of this is it can be complicated and a little bit time-consuming to set up, and there's certain medical qualifications as well, but it is an interesting investment option that not enough people are talking about. So it's something to take into account, is that just having your money sitting in CDs or savings, especially if there's a large chunk there might be some other investment options available where you can still get principal protection, safety, but a better rate of return with some additional benefits available. So I know I threw a lot at you today, and there's a lot of information, but in summary, the big 6 mistakes we see people making is in retirement focusing on rate of returns instead of focusing on income. So mistake number 1 is not focusing on income in retirement. And that's one of the 5 pillars of a sound retirement. Mistake number 2, misunderstanding risk. Mistake number 3, being unaware of the fees you're paying in retirement. Mistake number 4, leaving assets with a potential tax liability to your spouse. Mistake number 6, tax preparing and not tax planning. And then mistake number 6, accepting low rates of return when there's better alternatives out there. So there's a lot of information that I threw at you. If you want more information on this, I invite you to attend one of our workshops, which you can do by giving us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. Again, 810-355-2584. Or shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com, or go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com. So hopefully you enjoyed this week. Look forward to talking to you next week. Make it a great week. Take care.
Learn more about Chris Berry and how he can help your family by visiting online at thechrisberryshow.com. That's thechrisberryshow.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 810-355-2584. That's 810-355-2584. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the elder care firm Prosperity Capital Advisors or the Castle Wealth Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice, or as a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security, or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.